Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon native tank, and I don't have anything specific on my mind at the moment. I've just got a few thoughts sort of rolling around in my head I want to talk about. So it's Saturday night and we're just going to have a little chat about my native tank and what I've got going on in there. I'll answer a few questions I've had from some viewers. First thing is I've got a new sunfish in the tank in addition to the one that I've already released a video of. If you will look dead center of the tank, it's just starting to swim off to the right now towards the larger sunfish. This one here is my larger of the two sunfish. They're still very skittish, so we're probably not going to get great looks at them tonight, but this one's being surprisingly cooperative. Now the thing I want to talk about is the difference between this one and the new one I've put in. The new one I've put in is right here, and I just put this one in about 24 hours ago, so it's still a little bit skittish. This one is much smaller, and at first glance they appear to be the same species, but I swear they're not. It's hard to really see the difference, but when you really start getting into the nitpicky details, you can tell. If you look at what would be called the ear, or the little black mark on the gill flap, on the larger of the fish, it's just a black mark. On the smaller of the fish, you can see how it has the sort of iridescent ring around it. The markings are not quite the same. The coloring is a little different. The larger one has a lot of pink in it and a lot of yellow on its underbelly when it turns. This one does not, but it has a lot more of the blue tracery around its mouth. It also has a much sleeker, streamlined look and a fatter belly on it. This is actually shaped a little more like a bass would be shaped, as opposed to this larger one over here is more of the flat, what would be called a panfish, a very laterally compressed fish. So they are really similar, but I still believe they are different species, and when I catch them, just the feel of them in the hand is completely different from one another. And then again, when you get into the looks of them, especially when I caught them out in their native habitat when they were nice and healthy with the sun shining on them, the colors are just outstanding. So hopefully over time the color will come up in these. I do have a few other species that I catch around here on a regular basis that I hope to get into the tank at some point. If I remove these and add other ones or something, that's okay. That's probably all part of what's going to happen. But that brings me to another point about the sunfish in this tank. This tank is not any kind of biological exactitude. This is not a biotope tank. This is just me goofing off with some local fish that I catch around here. I'm not any kind of a expert at all. I know sunfish. I don't know all the little details between this species and that species. I do have viewers that do know that kind of stuff though, and I always appreciate the input. I get a lot of info that way. So if anyone wants to try to identify this one, the larger one's already been identified as a bluegill, and I'm pretty sure that's an accurate identification. But this smaller one that's a little sleeker also has a very large mouth. I bet the mouth on this small one is at least the size of the mouth on that larger one. And if we can keep it down at this end of the tank, the lighting is much better. I do want to talk about the lighting on this tank a little bit too. We're going to have trouble really seeing the full color because the tubes on this tank are getting kind of old and they're just really losing their range of spectrum. And if you're not putting the colored light into the tank, you just won't get the colors reflecting back off of the fish. So the left hand side of the tank that looks so bright white and clear and sparkly, and you get to see all these beautiful colors. Down on this end, when you see these rosy-sided dace, for example, at this end of the tank, you actually see how beautiful they are. Absolutely stunning little fish. I love them. I've apparently grown up around these my whole life, and up until I caught these to put in my tank, I did not know what they were and had never seen them before. When I was out collecting minnows, I was collecting these little minnows, the ones with the black stripe down the side. I still don't know what they're called. But I've seen these my whole life, and that's just what I always thought was in the stream, and I've always referred to as minnows. And while I was catching them, I kept seeing these little glints of blue and red, and I didn't know if it was my imagination or what. And I just started scooping in the area where I was seeing the colors, and one of the random scoops, and I pulled up a little net full of color. So I am tickled pink with them. I really, really like them a lot. Absolutely beautiful little fish. Of course, my golden shiners in here. I've thought about these a little more too. If you follow along with my videos, you'll know that I am planning on putting some larger fish in this tank at some point, possibly a bass, maybe a perch. Whatever they are, they're going to be predatory fish, and this is going to be a pretty rough and tumble tank. So unfortunately, those beautiful rosy-sided dace are probably going to become prey at some point, and so will all the other small fish. So instead of getting rid of the golden shiners, I may actually just leave them in the tank, because they may be the only fish big enough to survive a small perch or a medium-sized to small bass in the tank, and that way I will still have the nice rounded population. I'll have the nice little shoaling fish along with the individual bass or the individual perch, and maybe one or two sunfish. And, you know, again, we'll just have to see how the tank rounds itself out. But I think rather than getting rid of those slightly larger shoaling fish, I should probably leave them in here and let nature take its course, because who knows, maybe by the end of the summer they'll have been eaten too. You never know what might end up in this tank at some point. So there's that sunfish again. I'm hoping we can get him down this end and see him a little more clearly under the light, and you'll get to see how much color really are in these fish. They're absolutely beautiful. Now there's another species around here that I've always thought of as a bluegill, but apparently is not. See, he's already taken shots at these fish. This one's a really aggressive fish. It's got a really big mouth on him. And there's another one out there that's real similar to this in shape, but it's really bright whitish yellow on the belly, and the ventral and anal fins are like a really, really sunshiny, bright yellowy white. And they are stunning. Absolutely beautiful sunfish. I have no idea what kind they are, but in the summertime when I'm out on my kayak or out on my boat, I catch them a lot. So I absolutely plan on getting one of them in the tank. And then the ones that I've always thought of as bluegill are sort of yellow on the bottom and very blue, like a bright blue across the top. And they're very, very laterally compressed with a very small mouth on a sort of pointy face. So I want to try to get one of them in here too, just because they're a little bit different looking and they're really pretty. So there's a few different species around here that I catch regularly, and hopefully, at least for a little while, we'll get a look at each and every one of them. And then over time, maybe we'll see which ones wind up being permanent inhabitants in the tank. This one certainly a contender, because it's small enough it would be nice to watch it grow in. I have not seen it eat yet, but it's probably going to start eating some shiners or minnows if it ever gets a chance. I'm sure if it comes across one of those very small crayfish on the bottom, I'm sure it'll take a shot at one of them. So we'll see how that goes. The other little bit of news I wanted to talk about with this tank is the little fish that I have been referring to as my mystery fish. One bit of good news is I saw it eat flake food tonight for the first time. It didn't seem like it was enjoying it all that much, but it did eat it. So that is a step in the right direction. It's been eating bloodworms, and now I've got it eating flake, and I'm still going to continue making sure it gets bloodworms. And hopefully it'll grow up to get a little bigger than it is now, because it has not really grown much at all since I've put it in this tank. The other thing is I've been calling it a mud sunfish because that's how it was identified to me, and it does indeed look like a mud sunfish. Someone the other day, however, suggested that it was a warmouth, and I didn't think it was. I dismissed a warmouth a while ago, but it turns out what I thought was a warmouth was something completely different. And this actually looks much more like a warmouth than it does a mud sunfish. And lastly, the location this was caught is outside the mud sunfish range, but right smack in the middle of warmouth territory. So I'm guessing this is a warmouth at this point. That's why I still keep calling it my mystery fish. Every time I think I've got it nailed down, it always turns out to be something different. But I am pretty sure that's a warmouth. The only thing I find a little hard to gather, to get my head around is why it's so difficult to feed, because sunfish are not difficult fish to feed. This one down here has been in the tank for less than a day, and I've already seen it picking up little bits of algae wafer off the bottom, like this Mayan cichlid is doing now. So no problem feeding this one already. There's a good look at one of those rosy-sided dace or rosy-side dace. So no problem feeding that one. I have not yet seen this one over here feed on anything. It just tends to hide a lot. This one's a lot more timid than the other one that we were just looking at, the smaller one. So keep in mind, this is just a tank that I'm goofing off with, having fun. This is just meant to capture a little slice of my outdoor experience. I know I've got a few people that have been inspired by my little project here, and that's awesome. I always like it when someone tells me they've been inspired by one of my tanks and they're going to try to set up something similar or do something similar. But as far as some of the questions I've been getting, they've been a little on the technical side about, species and conditions and all that. Again, this is not scientific. I'm just going out and catching fish and bringing them home and putting them in my tank. If it turns out that they can't live in my water and they wind up dying, well, I just won't bring that kind of fish home anymore. This is not going to be any kind of real specific biotope tank or scientific experiment at all. So just keep that in mind as we go along. This is going to be fun, it's going to be interesting, and I'm sure it's going to be educational for all of us. I know it's going to be for me. It already has been for me. I also, at some point, want to talk about the crayfish in this tank, but probably not in this video because I want to be able to see more than one at the same time, and I don't see any out right now. But I'm positive this crayfish back here is a virile crayfish, which is an invasive. And all my life, again, I'm not, I don't really study this stuff. I've just caught crayfish my whole life. And I've always just assumed we had this kind of crayfish. I've never looked at them close enough or thought about it enough to wonder whether we had more than one species. And some of the other crayfish in this tank are very clearly different looking. They have different coloration and different markings on their carapace. So I'm pretty sure I've got more than one species of crayfish in this tank too. So this one is a virile crayfish, and again, it's invasive. I'm not sure how it got here or whether it's really harmful invasive. There's a lot of stuff around here that is considered invasive but is not harmful. The brown trout is not native to North America, yet nobody complains when they go around stocking the rivers full of brown trout. So just because something's non-native or invasive, I don't necessarily know if that's always bad. Although I don't know if the trout would be considered invasive or not. But these are considered invasive, and they're just everywhere. Again, I've thought I've been catching them my whole life, but as it turns out, I've got other ones in here that are slightly different, and no matter how much I look around, I am not going to find one. I know we've got one down in here. I can see it down in there. That's a little burrow that's been dug out. There's another one that lives kind of behind this rock and sort of under there. You can tell there's a sort of burrow under there. I know another one is living in there. And there's 3 or 4 smaller ones in here somewhere. So at some point we will do a video where we'll really get a good comparison and we'll be able to look at the two together. At any rate, I feel like I've rambled on long enough. I just wanted to have a little bit of a look at my native tank tonight. I'm really excited about the sunfish. And as the weather gets nicer, maybe we'll be able to get out and do some video out on the water. I'm hoping my stickers for my kayak show up this week, so if you're interested in any sort of outdoors video, I usually do throw together some little montage videos of my experiences out paddling, and maybe we'll see if we can't catch some fish or whatever. So look forward to all that stuff. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss any of that. And don't forget, this is my native tank. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you real soon on the next one.